My name's Tom Place, this is Chasing Cars, and with me today is the Lexus NX. You know, perhaps I shouldn't be surprised with the huge success of the Toyota RAV4 in Australia, that also its premium sibling in the Lexus NX would also be a very successful vehicle. If you discount the likes of the Tesla Model Y, this is the best seller in its segment. That means it outsells the likes of the BMW X3, the Audi Q5, and also the Mercedes-Benz GLC. Real titans of the industry and all very impressive vehicles in their own right. So it really got me thinking, what is it that makes this vehicle so desirable to Aussie buyers? We're going to have a look at that today in our official review. We're also going to have a look at the design, have a look at the interior, also take it for a drive and tell you what it's going to cost you to own and run before we deliver our final verdict. But before we jump into today's video, please don't forget to like and subscribe and comment down below if you want to see more content like this. Chasing Cars, honest reviews of your next car. Brought to you by Budget Direct. Now, this being Lexus's most popular vehicle, it stands to reason there'll be a few options available. The range kicks off at around about $63,000, about where the RAV4 actually tops out. And for that one, you're getting the NX 250. That is a naturally aspirated 2.5 litre engine. Above that sits the NX 350. That uses a 2.4 litre turbocharged 4-cylinder engine, and it's a bit more of a sporty vibe. It's only available in F-Sport trim. So above that sits what I've got here beside me, which is the 350H. It's their hybrid vehicle, as the H would suggest, and that is available in 3 different flavors. It sits in luxury, F-Sport, and also sports luxury, which is the one I have here today. Now, there's also a range of enhancement packs. I recommend you go have a look on the website yourself to try and figure them out, because it's a little bit all over the place depending on which grade you do indeed go for. Now, above that sits the NX 450H+. That's their plug-in hybrid, whereas this is a closed-loop hybrid that you're probably a bit more used to. Most people, though, they go for the 350H, and specifically this one is the all-wheel drive with the sports luxury trim and also with the enhancement pack 2 thrown in on top of it. That means you've got a list price of about $89,000 before on-road costs, making it a very expensive mid-size SUV, though that is a shockingly common price point nowadays. It really is just a sign of how expensive things have gotten, but nevertheless, it doesn't necessarily mean it's not good value, as we'll go through today. Now, just taking a look at the design briefly, I actually really like the way this thing looks. I think it's perfectly inoffensive, and it's got some nice smooth lines here, and it just flows really nicely. I think this is going to be one of those vehicles that we look back on in 20 years' time and we go, wow, that still looks really good. It's just got such a nice and timeless design, whereas I think some of the design features of its competitors out there, you know, let's say a little bit BMW, just throwing them under the bus a little bit, they have been a bit more experimental, and I'm not really sure that they're going to have that same amount of broad appeal, especially in 20 years' time. Now, this being the sports luxury, look, for the most part, it does look fairly similar to the other grades, but we do have 20-inch wheels here, which, look, I think they do look really nice, so they do have a bit of an effect on the ride, as I'll talk a bit more about later on. But anyway, that's enough for the outside. Let's jump on the inside. Now, the interior of the NX is definitely my favorite part about this vehicle. It's just a comfortable and it's a logical place to be, and I think that's really the two things that a luxury vehicle should nail, and in that order. So starting with the seats, for example, these are leather seats on the sports luxury, and they're also perforated, and that's because these are heated and ventilated, which is very nice indeed. One thing I will point out though is we have 12 degrees of adjustment on this seat, which also features lumbar adjustment built in, and we also have position memory, but we don't have those same features on the passenger seat, which is only 8 ways of adjustment, and we don't have position memory, and we don't have lumbar adjustment, which I think is a little bit disappointing, because it kind of makes you a bit of a second-class citizen as the front passenger. And if you swap between your partner, for example, it's nice and easy to get in the car and just click the button for your particular preference, so you don't have to muck around with it extensively. You both can just swap around whenever you want, just get in and go, and I think that is part of the luxury experience. So just a small little criticism there, but the seats themselves are really comfortable. I really enjoy sitting in these. I've done some long stints during my weeks with this car, and honestly, yeah, one of the best seats I've sat in quite some time, so well done, Lexus. Now, if we take a look more broadly at the interior now, you'll see that we've got a couple of different screens involved here. One is the heads-up display, nice and clear, nice and crisp, perfect. Every car should have one, in my opinion. opinion. They're absolutely brilliant. We've got the digital driver's display, which I don't love quite as much, simply for the fact that it doesn't really do all that much. It's nice and simple, which, is kind of a good thing in a way. You don't want a clutter of information, but there's some rivals out there like Audi with its Q5 that has the ability, for example, to have your maps directly in front of you, and this doesn't really feature that same functionality. However, when we go over to the 14-inch center touchscreen, kind of makes up for the rest of it because it's absolutely huge. You're really not going to miss much on this screen, and it's also just very easy to use, very responsive, and it's just a very good unit in general. Wireless Apple CarPlay, wireless Android Auto, as you would expect. Now, if you've watched my reviews before, you probably will know that I'm prone to a bit of a whinge when it comes to not having physical controls, but when we do have like nice and clear touchscreen controls that are nice and easy to touch, and they're always there, I don't really mind quite so much. So they do take up quite a bit of the screen, though we do still have some actual physical dials down here for things like the temperature, so that's nice. And you also have like a volume knob here as well, and also the front windscreen demister, which is really nice when you get in on those frosty mornings. So certainly nice indeed. Now, you won't often hear me complaining about the build quality of Lexus vehicles. It's one of their best marks, really, but I have noticed a few creaks when using the vehicle this week, and specifically it is to do with this 14-inch touchscreen. If I come over here, I don't know if you can hear that, but it's making a real kind of rackety noise, and it's actually moving a lot more than I would be comfortable with personally. And I know that it's a big sticky out touchscreen and things like that, and these are a little bit more prone to things like that. But for example, my Ford Mustang Mach-E, that had a big touchscreen as well, and that didn't make any creaky noises or move much at all. So I think that's a little bit of work to do there on that one, I'm afraid. And also the center console, there's a little bit of squeak with that as well, not quite as much, but nevertheless. And while I'm also complaining about the center console, may I just say that the gloss black plastic down here, it looks really cheap, and you can see how dirty it is when I just run my fingers over it. This is only really for 2 weeks of usage. It started to collect and started to get a little bit gross, whereas the rest of the interior looks perfectly fine. So I'd love if Lexus got rid of that material in particular. But look, overall it's nice, but I am a little bit disappointed with those build quality issues. Now, finally, in the good column, I just want to say this Mark Levinson stereo really is quite fantastic. It's a 17 speaker unit, and just the subtle clarity that comes from this unit is something that I've really enjoyed listening to this week, particularly because the sound deadening in this car is so good. I've been doing lots of trips along the highway where things are naturally a little bit more noisy, but I've been able to listen to my music at a nice low volume. And I really do think that between the nice comfortable seats and the pretty good ride, that makes for a very nice recipe for some long miles. So definitely a good thing to aim for if you're looking to get an NX. Jumping into the back seat now and sitting behind my own driving position at 6 foot tall, look, I've got stacks of room. It's actually really impressive. I've got a good amount of knee room, a good amount of toe room, and also a good amount of headroom, despite the fact that we have a panoramic sunroof here, and I can't say that for all of its rivals. I'll also note that I've been having my child seat in the back here, and I've still had plenty of room for other occupants in the car. I know recently when I had the Mercedes-Benz GLC, that was definitely not the case. There was severe compromise to the front passenger. So something to think about there if you are looking to buy this as a family car. And also, I do recommend if you are buying a family car, take that baby seat to the dealership and you'll thank me later. But anyway, back to the interior. So in terms of touch points, they're all still pretty nice back here. We haven't gone down in quality significantly. And one of the things you do get by going for the Enhancement Pack 2 is 3 state heated seats here, and you also get a heated steering wheel. And also these seats do have the ability to tumble forward using the electronic mechanism, which is kind of nice. One less thing that you have to do physically. So that's all very nice indeed. But anyway, in the terms of the other things in the back seat here, we also have some USB points down there. We also have some air vents here. They're nice and big. They're nice and easy to actually reach your face. They're not sitting below your knees, so that's very nice indeed. And we also have a pull down armrest. But look, in general, this is a very nice place to be. We've got a good amount of visibility, a good amount of space, and a good amount of amenities. I don't know what much more you would want. Coming around to the rear of the NX now, and we open up the tailgate. Gives you a nice beep on the way up too. Power tailgate, as you expect on a vehicle with this price point. We reveal the 520 litre boot. Pretty good size boot, actually. Like, you've got a good amount of not just space in terms of a literage, but also size. It's just nice and square, and you do have a bit of storage on the sides as well. Also, just fairly flat here, but it's still got a bit of a lip so you don't have everything just falling out when you park down on a hill. So that's nice. We also have a bit of underfloor storage here, though you will notice that there is no spare tire on the NX, which is really disappointing. I'm not really sure why they've done that. This does have run flat tires, but look, that's not very helpful if you bend a rim in the Outback, for example. But anyway, you do have a couple of other things like some tie down points over here. You also have some netting on the sides, but look, that's pretty much about it. One thing I will note is the fact that we've only got a 40-60 split in the back seats here. Not a deal breaker, obviously, but it'll be nice to see the 40-20-40 split that we do see on some European models, just to give you a little bit more flexibility. Now, that brings me to a bit of a strange criticism, actually, and I'm not sure if this is the same on every NX, but this is the NX that's been put in front of me, and we have had some weird, similar issues from other Lexuses in the past. So NX owners, let me know in the comments down below if this affects you. And that is the matter of the central locking. It's just been very, very difficult to live with this week. Now, if you look up here, you'll see I've got two buttons. One is just to close and the other is to close and lock. Now, if I press the close and lock, it beeps at me and it won't do anything. And I think it thinks that I'm in the way. So if I try and get a little bit further away, it still won't close. You know, I'm not really sure what I'm supposed to do with that. So anyway, I can still close it if I press this button, but I've been actually having just a bit of a hard time locking the vehicle in general, and that's through a variety of methods. One is just the fact that it's been beeping at me repeatedly because I've got a child seat in the back. Fair enough, that's okay, but I still don't like being beeped at incessantly regardless. But the main one I have a problem with is when I go over to the locks, over here, you'll see we can actually lock the doors from the back here, which is nice. I'll press it, and it just beeps at me continuously. Now, if you're looking through the window, you'll see that it actually thinks that the key is still inside the car, which I think is why it thinks that I can't lock the doors from the outside here and why I can't lock the boot. So that's a little bit interesting, and I'm not really sure why it does that, but nevertheless, that is very, very annoying. So what's it going to cost you to run the Lexus NX every single day? Well, let's start with fuel consumption, shall we? This is the hybrid variant, so it has an official combined consumption claim of 5 litres per 100 Ks. Now, we've managed to get about 6.3 this week, though I do think I could have done a lot better if I wasn't doing quite so much time on the highway and doing a bit more time around town, which is where these hybrid systems really do seem to shine a little bit more. So one thing for you to note there if you are more of a country buyer or spend a lot of time on the highway. Now, in terms of servicing, you're going to be going back to the mechanic every 12 months or 15,000 kilometers. Those are the service intervals, and you've got a cap price locked in for about 5 years. Now, over that time, you're going to be paying about a hair under $3,000, which I wouldn't call particularly expensive or affordable in this segment. So warranty is 5 years or unlimited kilometers. Nothing really to write home about. That's about the industry standard now. So what's it like driving the Lexus NX? Well, this is another feather in the cap of this vehicle's abilities. And a lot of that does come down to the hybrid system. So without going too much into the details, the way that this hybrid system works is that electric motors do the vast majority of the low speed driving, whereas the engine takes over in more of a direct drive on the higher speed. So if you're around town, then you're going to find that this vehicle is really quite refined because the electric motors do a lot of the heavy lifting there. Of course, the petrol motor still needs to be charging it up, and so you will hear a bit of a hum in the background. For the most part, it's actually quite hushed, and I have really enjoyed that about the experience. One thing I will say with the hybrid system though, is there are times where you start to lean a little bit more on it, but not necessarily going flat out. I'm talking about going up things like more demanding hills where the engine's having to kick in a little bit more to generate power for those electric motors, where it starts to have a bit of an unrefined chug to the way it goes about its business. It's a bit clunky and it doesn't sound very nice. And look, I'm one of those people where if I'm going to hear some sound, I'd rather hear a nice sound, if you know what I mean. And I think that is one area where its European counterparts have a little bit of an edge. So for example, like a BMW X3 with its beautiful straight sixes, those are nice engines to listen to and you can hear them in the background. It's not a problem that happens all the time, and I think it's something that you can definitely learn to live with. You know, it's the king of first world problems I'm talking about. But it's definitely an area of refinement that I'd love to see improved, perhaps by a little bit of turbocharging to keep it a little bit hushed. I don't know, perhaps we might might see something in the update. But for now, that's just something to be mindful of if sound really is the thing that gets you going. Now, when you're on the move, you do notice that this is definitely more of a front-wheel drive biased all-wheel drive system. So the Germans out there with things like the BMW X3, they do have more of a rear-wheel drive biased all-wheel drive system. And I think if you're looking for more of a dynamic type vehicle, that's probably something that you're going to be a little bit more interested in. And also we'll say the same thing is true when it comes to the chassis balance. This is much more of a comfort-focused car. That's not to say it's not dynamic when it wants to be. It's actually shockingly grippy when you throw it into a corner sometimes, but the body roll does start to feel a little bit much for some. You get a little bit thrown all over the place, and it gets to a point where it is certainly capable, but you're not necessarily enjoying it like you would be in its European counterparts, if that makes sense. So that's more how I divide the difference there. Now, in terms of the ride, there are some issues there, and I think that's really down to the 20-inch wheels. So they do offer some 18-inch wheels on the luxury grade, and our previous experience has found that that is the much more comfortable version to go for. And if I was going to snap one of these up and I was going for one of the higher grades, I would be asking for the smaller wheel size. We often do say that here on Chasing Cars, but it certainly is the case, and it definitely is the case here. And one of the reasons is, unlike the F-Sport grade, which does come with adaptive dampers, this does not. And I think that's really disappointing. I think that's something that Lexus should offer on this model for sure, and they unfortunately don't at the current time. But maybe that would help make it a little bit better. But regardless, I think just going for some smaller wheels, you'll definitely thank yourself there. Now, this is a family vehicle, so safety does matter. So we'll just touch on that nice and quickly. So it does have a 5-star NCAP score that it got back in 2022 when the protocols were a little bit less strict back in the day, but they're still pretty current in terms of the general score for things like that, for things like physical testing. So things, for example, like adult occupant protection, that was rated 91% by NCAP, and child occupant protection was given 89. So generally pretty good scores, though I will note that the Mercedes-Benz GLC had a slightly better score for both of those counterparts, but it's like 1 or 2%. It's really absolutely nothing. In terms of the actual safety equipment though, we do have a lot of good stuff. Things like, for example, stop and go adaptive cruise control with lane centering, really well tuned and, you know, really well done there from Lexus. We also have some other things like just a nice 360-degree camera, nice and crisp, nice and clear, makes parking a breeze. So look, in general, do I see the appeal of driving the Lexus NX? Absolutely I do. It's just a comfortable cruiser, and if you're not looking for something to go fast in, why not go for something that's a little bit more quiet, a little bit more comfortable, and just easy to drive? It makes all the sense in the world. 5 years ago, I remember riding along in the first generation of the NX with founder Tom Baker, and we were both remarking at just how underwhelming and really just uncompetitive it was with its rivals at the time. Whereas I think this second generation NX is just a very different story. I certainly think it really differentiates itself from the likes of the Toyota RAV4, of which it shares its underpinnings, through things simply from the fact that it's just a lot more sophisticated in terms of its chassis, and also I think that drivetrain's had a bit of tweaking as well. But also, if you look at the curb weights, you'll notice that the difference between a cruiser hybrid all-wheel drive and this one I've got here beside me is 115 kilos, which is a pretty significant deal given that on the surface level, they're generally pretty similar in what drivetrains they offer. And I think the difference there is just how much more sound deadening has gone into this vehicle, and you really do feel that when you're driving around town. And I've certainly just really appreciated that during my time driving this vehicle in the last few weeks. In saying that, this is not a perfect vehicle. I think the price, for example, is getting a little bit up there for what is effectively just a series parallel hybrid. You're getting very close to 100 grand, and now that the NX 450h Plus is back on the scene, well, interestingly, once you add all the enhancement packs to this one, it's only about 5 grand difference, which seems pretty ridiculous. In the past, the difference between the price of a hybrid and a plug-in hybrid has been huge, but only just 5 grand? Well, that's a very interesting proposition, isn't it? Now, in saying that, the plug-in hybrid has had a few problems in the past when we've driven it. Things like just the ride and handling not being quite as good as this model. So do take that into consideration if you're weighing up the two of those. But that also brings me back to another point, and that's the enhancement packs. Now, given the fact that we have the luxury, the F-Sport, and also the sports luxury, the top dog, which is this one, available, I don't really think that there should be enhancement packs on top of that again. Like, this is already a pretty expensive vehicle, and I don't think things like a heated steering wheel and panoramic sunroof should be optional extras on top of that. I just think they should be standard. But anyway, those are just my thoughts there. So all of that brings me back to the question that I posed at the start of this review. Why do people like the NX and specifically the 350h so much? Well, I think that's just because it's just a bit of a no-brainer purchase, isn't it? It's a very comfortable car generally, although I do have some reservations when it comes to the ride. But things inside the cabin, like the nice comfortable seats and also just the nice touch points everywhere, the logical layout of everything, it's just an easy car to own and use, and it's also just relentlessly fuel efficient. And I do think those are really key attributes to a lot of buyers out there first and foremost. But anyway, that's all we've got time for in today's video. Please let us know your thoughts in the comments section down below, and particularly if you own an NX. Did we miss anything? Let us know, and also don't forget to like this video if you did indeed like it. And also don't forget to subscribe. But for now, that's all. Thank you for watching Chasing Cars.